Have you ever found yourself in a moment, overwhelmed by a rush of emotion so intense that you felt like you were no longer in control? Like a tidal wave crashing over you, pulling you under, leaving you gasping for air, and wondering how things escalated so quickly? Maybe it was a snide remark from a colleague, an unexpected change in plans, or the tone of a loved one's voice. Suddenly your heart races, your thoughts spiral, and your reactions take over. You've felt it before, the impulse to react, to defend, to lash out. And in that moment, you might have wondered, why did I let this get to me? If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. In fact, it's the all too common experience of emotional reactivity, where the world pushes your buttons and without pause or thought, you press the alarm. Imagine this. Maya, a woman in her mid-30s, finds herself caught in a cycle she can't seem to break. At work, a colleague makes an offhand comment about her project. "It's not really your thing, is it?" he says, with a chuckle that grates on her nerves. Before she knows it, Maya's face flushes. Her pulse quickens. Her mind races with 1,000 retorts. How dare he? She should stand up for herself. She needs to show him she's competent, capable. She's not going to let him belittle her. She opens her mouth, ready to unleash, but instead of feeling empowered, her words fall flat, her body tense. The rest of the day is a blur of frustration. The comment lingers in her mind, replaying in a loop. She can't focus on her tasks. Her relationships with colleagues become strained, and even her evenings are tainted by the sharp sting of the interaction. Now, imagine the next day. The same colleague makes another comment, and the cycle begins again. This time, it's not just one interaction. It's a cascade of little triggers, an email, a glance, an unexpected deadline. All day she's reacting. Her peace is a distant memory. Maya's story is more common than we'd like to admit. She's not a bad person. In fact, she's likely doing her best. But that's the problem, isn't it? We're all doing our best, yet the world keeps testing us, and it feels like we're constantly on edge, caught in a web of emotional reactivity. You might recognize this feeling, that sudden jolt when someone cuts you off in traffic, the tightness in your chest when you hear gossip about a friend, or the way your body tenses when you think about an argument you had last night. You know that feeling when your emotions hijack you, and you're left with nothing but the aftermath. Why does this happen? Why do we let ourselves be swept away like this? Think of your emotions as wild horses. They're powerful, untamed, and they can pull you in any direction. Without control, they run rampant, dragging you along, causing chaos. In those moments, you become a passenger in your own life. The world throws a trigger your way, a harsh comment, an unexpected obstacle, and wham! You're yanked into the chaos of your mind, where everything feels urgent, everything feels personal. But here's the truth. Your mind is not supposed to be at the mercy of these emotions. Like any wild animal, your emotions need to be tamed, not ignored or suppressed, but trained and harnessed. When you learn how to train your mind before the world tests you, you gain the ability to stay calm, no matter the storm. Let's step back and take a wider look at the problem of emotional reactivity. It's not just a one-time thing. It becomes a pattern. You react to one trigger, then another, and before you know it, your whole life starts to feel like a series of emotional explosions, where every day is a fire to be put out. Relationships fray. Your health begins to suffer, and your mental peace feels like a distant dream. This pattern doesn't just affect you, it affects everyone around you. James, a loving husband and father, finds himself repeatedly snapping at his wife, Elise. She never meant to upset him. She was simply sharing a concern about their son's schoolwork. But the moment she opens her mouth, James feels his blood pressure rise. Why doesn't she understand? I'm doing the best I can. And there it is. He's already reacting before he even understands the situation. He raises his voice. Their conversation spirals into an argument. And before either of them realizes it, they're both in tears, frustrated and disconnected. It wasn't about the schoolwork at all. It was about his unresolved stress, his reactive nature, and his inability to manage the emotions that had been building up inside. James knows something is wrong, This is not how he wants to be. But the reactive pattern is ingrained, and like Maya, he's caught in the cycle. You might feel the same way. You probably recognize the frustration of being unable to break the cycle of overreaction, the guilt, the regret. You might even tell yourself, this is it. I'm going to change. I'm going to stay calm. But then, in the heat of the moment, your emotions take control again. You react, you overreact, and the cycle continues. But what if there was another way? What if you didn't have to be at the mercy of your emotions anymore? What if, instead of feeling controlled by every external circumstance, you could be the one who controlled your internal state? Imagine, for a moment, being like the eye of the storm, calm, centered, and unshaken, no matter how much chaos surrounds you. In this stillness, you find clarity. You find peace. You are not at the mercy of what others say or do. You have power over your emotional world. This doesn't mean you'll never feel anger, frustration, or sadness. Emotions are natural, but it means you can respond to them rather than react to them. You can pause, take a breath, and choose your response. You can train your mind to stay grounded no matter the storm. As we move into the next chapter, we'll explore exactly how to do this, how to begin the process of training your mind, step by step, to not only recognize emotional triggers, but to respond to them in a way that brings peace rather than chaos. Because in the end, the key to peace lies not in avoiding the world's tests, but in preparing your mind to face them with grace and strength. What if your greatest power was hidden in the space between stimulus and response? What if everything you've ever needed to feel calm, centered, and in control was already available to you, waiting in that brief moment before you reacted? It's easy to feel like life is a series of reactions, one after another. Someone says something that offends you, and you react. Traffic gets backed up, and you lose your patience. A stressful situation arises, and before you know it, you're overwhelmed by emotion. But what if you didn't have to live this way? What if you could make the choice before the emotions flooded in? What if you could train your mind to pause, to assess, and to respond instead of simply reacting? This, my friend, is where the true power lies. Imagine the story of David, a man whose daily routine is full of stress. On his commute to work, he finds himself stuck in traffic. Every day it's the same. Cars are backed up, the air is heavy with impatience, and honks echo around him. David's blood pressure rises. He feels the anger building, tightening his chest. "Why does this always happen to me?" he mutters. His grip on the steering wheel tightens. He feels as if the entire world is conspiring against him. The more he thinks about it, the more frustrated he becomes. One day, as he's caught in yet another traffic jam, something shifts. Instead of reacting with anger, David decides to pause. He takes a deep breath. He notices the rush of tension in his body, and instead of feeding it, he simply observes it. This is frustrating, he thinks, but it's not the end of the world. He reminds himself that the traffic is beyond his control. He can't change the situation, but he can change how he responds to it. David begins to notice a shift within himself. He no longer lets the external chaos dictate his internal state. By choosing to respond rather than react, David finds peace even in the most frustrating moments. He no longer feels controlled by the world around him. He is the one in control. This shift from reaction to response is the core of non-reactivity. But what does it actually mean to practice non-reactivity in everyday life? To start, it's important to understand the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is automatic. It's driven by impulse, emotion, and habit. When someone cuts you off in traffic, your first instinct might be to speed up and give them an angry glare. When your boss criticizes your work, you might feel your stomach tighten and snap back with a defensive retort. These are reactions, knee-jerk responses to the stimulus around you. Response, on the other hand, is deliberate. It's a conscious choice made with awareness and intention. It's like being the thermostat in a room rather than the thermometer. The thermometer simply reflects the temperature of its surroundings. It rises or falls depending on what's happening around it. The thermostat, however, controls the temperature. It doesn't react to the environment, it sets the tone. The same is true in your life. You are the thermostat. The world around you is the thermometer. You don't have to be at the mercy of life's ups and downs. You don't have to let external events dictate your internal state. When you learn to pause before reacting, you give yourself the space to respond with purpose, rather than getting swept away in the emotional currents of the moment. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not things that disturb us, but our interpretation of them." This simple yet profound truth reveals that we are not disturbed by external events, but by how we choose to interpret them. The situation itself is neutral. It's our thoughts about the situation that shape our emotional experience. Take the example of traffic again. The cars and the delays are neutral events. They don't have any inherent power over you. It's your interpretation of those events, your belief that they are unfair, your frustration with the loss of time, that causes you to react. When you shift your perspective and choose to respond differently, you reclaim your power. You don't need to let the traffic steal your peace. This idea of non-reactivity doesn't just apply to traffic jams or difficult coworkers. It's a mindset that can transform every area of your life. Whether you're dealing with conflict in relationships, pressure at work, or a challenging situation, you always have the power to choose how you respond. This doesn't mean suppressing your emotions or ignoring your feelings. It means acknowledging them and then making a conscious choice about how to act in response. Another powerful quote from the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius is, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This is the essence of non-reactivity. It's the realization that, while we cannot control the world, we can control how we respond to it. This is where your true strength lies. In daily life, this could look like taking a moment to breathe and think before responding in a heated argument, instead of instantly retaliating with words that might be hurtful. Pausing to reflect when you're overwhelmed by a busy schedule, recognizing that you don't have to let stress take over your body. Choosing calm in the face of unexpected challenges. Remembering that your inner peace isn't dependent on how smoothly things go. Non-reactivity isn't about being passive or indifferent to the world around you. It's about choosing to be active in how you respond. It's about realizing that while you can't always control what happens, you always have the ability to control how you meet the moment. This simple shift in mindset, recognizing that you are not a victim of external events but a master of your responses, has the power to change everything. It's a shift from being a leaf blown, about in the wind, to being the tree that stands strong, regardless of the storm. As you start to cultivate this mindset, you may find that your emotional state becomes more stable, even in the face of chaos. You may begin to feel a deeper sense of inner peace, regardless of the circumstances around you. The world may still test you, but you will have the tools to face each test with calm and clarity. Now that you understand the mindset of non-reactivity, it's time to learn your first tool, the tool that will help you pause in those crucial moments and choose your response with intention. Stay with me, because in the next chapter, we'll dive into a practical technique to help you master this shift step by step. Most people react faster than they think and regret it just as fast. Whether it's a sharp word in an argument, a harsh email you hit send on too soon, or the sudden outburst that follows a stressful situation, the truth is, reaction is often our first instinct. But what if the secret to emotional control wasn't in the reaction at all, but in the pause before it? Imagine this scene. Sarah sits at her desk, staring at her phone. The message on the screen stings like a slap. It's from her boss. "I'm disappointed with the progress on your project. This isn't up to our standards." Her chest tightens. Anger flares. How dare he? Her mind races through 1,000 retorts. She wants to fire back, to defend herself, to tell him he doesn't understand the pressures she's under. She feels her pulse quicken, her fingers trembling, ready to type a scathing reply. But then something stops her. A quiet voice, a fleeting thought. Pause. She stops herself, takes a deep breath, and closes her eyes. She feels the weight of the moment, the tension in her body, the heat rising in her face. For a split second, everything seems to hang in the balance. And in that stillness, something incredible happens. The world hasn't changed. Her boss's message is still there, the pressure is still mounting. But Sarah has just gained something invaluable: space. Space between the stimulus and her response. That brief moment where the impulse to react fades and the choice to respond with clarity emerges. She breathes in slowly. The tightness in her chest eases just a little. She takes another breath, a bit deeper this time, and suddenly she can think more clearly. The urge to lash out lessens. Instead of firing off an emotional reply, Sarah chooses to respond thoughtfully, acknowledging the feedback without becoming defensive. The pause worked. It gave her the distance to process her emotions and approach the situation from a place of control, not reactivity. This moment, a moment where you intentionally pause before reacting, is a game-changing tool for emotional control. It's simple, yet profound. The concept of the pause is rooted in timeless wisdom, and it's backed by modern neuroscience. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian neurologist and Holocaust survivor, famously said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." That space, that pause, is the key. It's where your power lies, not in your immediate reaction, but in your ability to step back, breathe, and make a choice. So, how do you practice the pause in real life? Let's break it down into simple steps so you can start using this tool in your own life. Recognize the trigger. The first step is awareness. In moments of emotional charge, whether it's a disagreement, stressful news, or even a challenging situation, notice the signs. Feel your body tensing, your heart rate increasing, your mind starting to race. This is your cue. You are about to react. The trigger has been pulled. Pause. This is the key moment. Before you do anything, before you say anything, take a conscious pause. It could be just a few seconds, but in that short time, you're creating a buffer between the stimulus and your reaction. In that space, you are no longer a slave to your emotions. Breathe now, breathe, not in a rushed, shallow way. Take a long, deep breath. Breathe in through your nose, hold for a moment, and exhale slowly through your mouth. This isn't just for calming your nerves, it's a physiological shift. Deep breathing helps activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for calming you down. This breath slows your heart rate and centers your mind. Choose your response. Once you've taken a breath, you've created space. Now you have the power to choose your response. Will you react in anger, frustration, or defensiveness? Or will you respond with clarity, patience, and thoughtfulness? This is where the pause has its greatest impact. It's the moment of transformation. You are no longer responding out of impulse. You are responding out of choice. Think of the pause as a diver surfacing for air before diving back into the water. Without the breath, the dive would be reckless, fueled by the need for air, the urgency to react. But with the pause, you come to the surface, gather your breath, and choose your direction before plunging back in. The pause doesn't make you avoid the emotional waters. It just gives you the clarity to swim through them with purpose. Now, here's the challenge for you. The next time you find yourself in a situation where emotions run high, whether it's a heated conversation, a stressful email, or a moment of frustration, practice the pause. The next time you feel your mind racing and your body tensing, take a deep breath and pause. Before you react, give yourself that moment of space to choose your response. The beauty of the pause is that it doesn't require you to stop feeling. It doesn't mean you won't be upset or frustrated. What it does is give you a moment to feel your emotions, acknowledge them, and then respond with intention. As you practice this, you'll notice something incredible. The pause doesn't just help you in the big moments, it also impacts your everyday life. The more you pause, the more you start to rewire your brain. You'll become less impulsive, less reactive, and over time, This practice of pausing will turn into a powerful habit that shapes the way you approach every situation. The breath gives you space, but what you do with that space is what transforms you. In the next chapter, we'll dive deeper into the power of this space and explore another strategy to help you build on this foundation. But for now, take a moment to reflect. When was the last time you gave yourself the gift of a pause? Most arguments start not with what was said, but with what we think was meant. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where something someone said or did completely set you off, only to realize later that your emotional reaction had very little to do with what actually happened? You probably have. We all do. It's human nature to interpret events through the lens of our own thoughts, beliefs, and past experiences. But here's the thing. These interpretations, these stories we tell ourselves, are often far from the truth. Let me share a story that illustrates this point. Anna had just finished presenting a proposal at work. She had poured her heart into it, thinking it was her best work yet. But when the meeting ended, John, her colleague, said, "It's a good start, but I think you could have done more with the data. We really need stronger analysis." Anna's heart sank. A good start? What did he mean by that? Her mind raced. Was the whole thing really just a good start? Does he think I'm incompetent? Maybe I didn't work hard enough? She could feel the frustration bubbling up, followed by the sting of self-doubt. She had barely made it to her desk when the emotional storm hit. Why would John say that? I worked so hard, and he didn't even acknowledge the effort, Anna thought. Does he think I'm not good enough? For the next hour, Anna's mind spiraled. Her work was never enough, was it? She replayed the meeting in her head over and over, each time with a harsher interpretation of John's words. The more she thought about it, the angrier she got, until she almost couldn't think straight. Then, as she sat there fuming, she remembered something. Something simple yet powerful. Most arguments start not with what was said, but with what we think was meant. She took a deep breath and forced herself to reread John's comment in her mind, this time more calmly. A good start, but I think you could have done more with the data. Now, with a clearer perspective, she wondered, what if John didn't mean anything negative at all? What if he was simply giving feedback on something that could be improved? In that moment, Anna began to reframe the story she had been telling herself. Instead of viewing John's words as a judgment of her capabilities, she began to interpret them as constructive feedback that would help her do even better next time. The emotional charge began to dissipate. She no longer felt attacked. She felt empowered to improve. This shift in perspective is what we call cognitive reframing, a powerful technique that allows you to change the meaning of an event in order to change your emotional response. In essence, reframing is the art of shifting your lens. When you adjust how you see something, you change how you feel about it. Here's the key idea. Most of our emotional reactions aren't caused by the event itself, but by the meaning we assign to it. We tend to make assumptions, fill in gaps, and interpret situations through the filter of our own insecurities, fears, or past experiences. This is why one person can hear the same comment and feel offended, while another might hear it and feel motivated. The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by their opinions about things." What does this mean? It means that it's not the external event, the comment, the setback, the criticism that disturbs us. It's the story we tell ourselves about it. Epictetus, like many other Stoics, believed that we have the power to control our reactions, not by changing the world around us, but by changing our perceptions of it. This philosophy is at the heart of cognitive reframing. It's a tool that teaches us to step back, question our initial interpretation of events, and choose a new, more constructive story. When we reframe our thoughts, we can diffuse the emotional charge and approach situations with a clearer, more grounded perspective. So, how can you practice reframing in real time? Here are 3 simple ways to start. 1. Pause and ask yourself, what's the evidence? When you're triggered by something someone says or does, take a moment to pause and ask yourself, what's the evidence for my interpretation? Often, we immediately assume the worst. Someone cuts us off in traffic, and we think, they're doing it on purpose to annoy me. But is that really true? Could there be another explanation? Maybe they didn't see you. Maybe they're rushing for an important reason. By taking a step back and looking at the situation with a more neutral perspective, you can begin to defuse the emotional charge and see things more clearly. 2. Reframe the narrative. What's another way to look at this? The next step is to actively reframe your thoughts. Instead of viewing the situation as an attack, ask yourself, how else can I interpret this? Going back to Anna's example, instead of assuming John's comment was a criticism of her abilities, she could reframe it as an opportunity for growth. Maybe John's feedback is exactly what she needs to take her work to the next level. Maybe he's just trying to push her to be her best. Reframing is about consciously choosing a new perspective, one that serves you, rather than sabotaging you with negative emotions. 3. Practice gratitude for the lesson. Another powerful tool in reframing is shifting your focus to gratitude. In every challenging situation, there's something to learn. Even in moments of perceived failure or criticism, there's an opportunity for growth. By practicing gratitude for the lesson, you can change the emotional charge from frustration to appreciation. When Anna reframed John's comment, she could have felt discouraged or bitter, but instead, by focusing on what she could learn from the feedback, she opened herself up to growth and improvement. The stories we tell ourselves shape our reality. Thoughts are like threads that weave the fabric of our emotional experience. But remember, you are the narrator, not the victim. You don't have to accept every narrative that comes your way. You can choose the story you want to tell, and in doing so, you can change the way you feel, the way you react, and the way you live. Now, let's pause for a moment. Imagine how different your day would be if, every time you felt emotionally triggered, you took a moment to pause, reframe the story, and choose a response that empowered you instead of draining you. But what if you didn't just reframe your thoughts? What if you chose not to respond at all? That's what we'll explore in the next chapter, as we dive deeper into the art of non-reactivity and the power of choosing silence over reaction. Silence isn't weakness. In the right moment, it's strategy. In the heart of the Roman Empire, the air was thick with tension. The empire faced a serious threat, a fierce and determined invasion that could spell disaster for all of Rome. The meeting room, filled with the empire's greatest military minds, buzzed with heated voices. The generals, all eager to act quickly, were calling for an immediate, aggressive assault. Among them sat Marcus Aurelius. As the voices rose and urgency filled the room, Marcus didn't add to the noise. He remained still, leaning slightly back, his face calm. His eyes closed for a brief moment, as though he were letting the weight of the situation settle on him. Around him, the room continued to buzz, but he did not speak. He didn't join in the frenzy. He didn't let the anxiety of the moment rush his thoughts. Minutes passed. The general's words grew more frantic, their suggestions becoming more extreme. Yet still, Marcus remained silent. His stillness wasn't indifference or weakness. It was his strength. The room began to sense it, and slowly the voices softened. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was calm, deliberate, and clear. He pointed out the strategic flaws in the rushed plan, highlighting how immediate action would lead to greater risk. His silence had given him the space to think deeply, and his words, when they came, were measured and wise. In that moment, his restraint had allowed him to see beyond the panic, to find a solution that no one else had seen. In this moment, silence wasn't the absence of action. It was the strategic use of restraint. It was power through quiet. It was Marcus Aurelius demonstrating a form of leadership that has echoed through the ages. Why silence works. So why does silence have such a profound impact? In high-stakes situations, whether personal conflict, public speaking, or moments of intense pressure, silence creates space. It disarms conflict, reveals hidden truths, and allows our minds to gather the necessary clarity before responding. When we react too quickly, emotions take over. We speak out of fear, frustration, or the need to win the argument. But when we choose silence, we create a gap between the stimulus, the provocation, and our response. This gap, the moment of restraint, gives us the opportunity to observe, to listen, and to choose how we want to respond, not based on impulse, but on wisdom. Psychologically, silence is incredibly disarming. It often creates an opening in the conversation, especially when the other person is expecting a response. When they're met with quiet instead of hostility or defensiveness, they're often forced to reevaluate their position. Silence, in many ways, is like a mirror. It reflects back the emotions of the other person and can create a moment of reflection for them. There's a profound wisdom in silence that transcends words. The Stoics understood this well. Seneca, another prominent Stoic philosopher, wrote, "Silence is one of the great arts of conversation." In other words, silence isn't a void, but a tool of communication. It's a space where clarity and truth can emerge without the noise of reactive thoughts. In fact, the great philosophers believed that the wise person listens more than they speak, because true understanding comes not from speaking, but from absorbing and contemplating. Silence as a tool for clarity. Think of silence like the space between musical notes. A single note, without the pause in between, would sound chaotic, almost unbearable. It's the silence between the notes that gives the music its rhythm, its flow, its meaning. Without silence, there's only noise. Similarly, in our lives, silence gives our thoughts room to breathe. It's in these pauses that we can assess situations more clearly. It's easy to get swept away in the noise of a heated argument, to speak without thinking, to let our emotions dictate our words. But when we embrace the silence before speaking, we give ourselves the opportunity to understand the underlying issues, to sift through our emotions, and to make a response that is deliberate and measured. When we take a moment of silence, we're not disengaging from the conversation or avoiding confrontation. We are choosing to be strategic in how we enter the conversation. We're showing respect to the situation, to ourselves, and to the other person by taking the time to listen to what's truly being said, not just the words, but the underlying emotions, intentions, and desires. How to practice silence in real life. Now that you understand the power of silence, how do you begin to incorporate it into your daily life? Here are a few ways to practice intentional silence in emotionally charged situations. In arguments and conflict. When you find yourself in the heat of an argument, especially one where emotions are running high, intentionally pause before responding. Take a deep breath. Count to 3. Allow yourself a moment of silence before you speak. In that silence, you may notice that your initial reaction, whether it's anger or defensiveness, begins to dissipate. This gives you the clarity to respond more thoughtfully. In interviews and high-stakes conversations, silence can be your ally in interviews or any situation where you want to come across as composed and thoughtful. When asked a difficult question, resist the urge to fill the silence with an immediate answer. Instead, take a moment to gather your thoughts. This shows confidence and can lead to more articulate, well-considered responses. In relationships, when someone says something hurtful or upsetting, resist the urge to immediately respond or defend yourself. Instead, pause. Reflect. In relationships, silence can communicate to the other person that you are processing the situation with care rather than reacting impulsively. This can help diffuse tension and create space for more meaningful communication. Silence, when used intentionally, becomes a tool of immense power. It isn't about avoiding confrontation or withdrawing from situations. It's about choosing how and when to engage. The art of restraint allows you to remain grounded, in control of your emotions, and in command of your response. When you stop rushing to speak, you start listening to what really matters, the true nature of the situation, the feelings of the other person, and the wisdom that arises from the space between the stimulus and your reaction. In that space, your power lies. So the next time you find yourself in an emotionally charged situation, remember Marcus Aurelius' example. Remember that silence isn't a sign of weakness, but a form of inner strength. It's in those moments of pause, those moments of strategic silence, that true clarity can emerge, And it's through that clarity that you'll find the strength to respond, not react. Let me tell you a story of someone who once couldn't go a day without reacting. Adam used to wake up each morning with a storm brewing inside him. From the moment he opened his eyes, the world felt like a battleground. The slightest inconvenience, a traffic jam, a late coffee order, a passing comment from a colleague, would send him into a tailspin. The anger would rise, his thoughts would race, and his reactions would always follow. Every day it felt like a constant fight to stay calm, and he was losing more often than he'd like to admit. At work, it was the same. He would snap at his coworkers over minor misunderstandings. He would raise his voice in meetings, even when it wasn't necessary. His temper was a regular feature of his relationships, and his personal life mirrored this chaos. Friends started to pull away. His partner grew frustrated, and his family didn't know how to deal with him anymore. His emotional life felt like a whirlwind, out of control and unpredictable. Even though he tried to hold it together, Adam often found himself apologizing, feeling the guilt of things he couldn't take back. But one day, something inside him shifted. Adam realized that he couldn't keep living this way. The anger, the frustration, the reactive nature, it was exhausting. It wasn't just hurting his relationships, it was slowly chipping away at his sense of self. He needed to change. He didn't know how, but he was desperate for something different. The first step, the pause. The first tool he discovered was simple: the pause. It came to him one morning when his boss, Sarah, gave him some critical feedback on a project he had worked hard on. Adam's immediate reaction was frustration. He could feel the anger rising in his chest, the impulse to argue, to defend himself, to explain why he was right, flooded his mind. He wanted to snap back, but then, almost instinctively, he paused. For the first time in a long time, Adam noticed the tension in his body, the tightness in his jaw, the quickening of his breath. Instead of rushing to respond, he took a slow, deep breath. He let the air fill his lungs and exhaled, releasing the tightness in his chest. In that space, a small moment of calm washed over him. He didn't need to react immediately. When he finally spoke, it was with a steadiness he hadn't felt in years. "Thank you for the feedback, Sarah," he said. "I'll take another look at the project and see how I can improve." The words weren't defensive. They weren't rushed. They were measured, calm. And for the first time, Adam felt in control, not of the situation, but of his response. This small shift, this simple pause, was the first step in his transformation. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make him realize that he didn't need to react to every trigger. He could choose a different path. The second step: reframing the story. As the days passed, Adam began to practice the pause more regularly, but he also realized there was another powerful tool he needed to add to his toolkit: reframing. One evening, after a long day at work, Adam was sitting at home with his partner, Mia. They were having dinner when Mia brought up something that had been bothering her. Adam, still feeling the pressure of the day, immediately felt his frustration rising. "What now?" he thought. "Does she not see I'm already overwhelmed?" But instead of letting his emotions take the lead, Adam paused. He took a slow breath, and instead of jumping into defensive mode, he reframed the situation. "This isn't an attack. Mia just wants to be heard. She's not criticizing me, she's asking for my attention." With that shift in perspective, Adam was able to respond differently. "I'm sorry I've been distracted, Mia. Let's talk about it." The conversation that followed was calm, respectful, and open. For the first time, Adam realized that the way he interpreted situations directly influenced how he felt about them. He didn't just change his habits, he began changing his identity. He wasn't just someone who reacted, he was someone who paused to think, who reframed situations before jumping to conclusions. These tools weren't just strategies for dealing with other people, they were reshaping the way he saw the world. The third step: embracing silence. The third tool came to Adam when he found himself in a meeting, feeling cornered by his colleague Tom, who was aggressively questioning his work. Tom's words stung, and Adam could feel his instinct rising again. He wanted to retaliate, to defend himself, to prove he was right. But this time, he didn't just pause or reframe. He embraced silence. In the middle of Tom's critique, Adam chose to say nothing. For several long seconds, there was only silence. The room felt heavy, but Adam stood firm. His eyes were calm, his posture neutral. He wasn't defeated or passive. He was simply choosing to hold space. His silence wasn't about avoidance. It was about creating a moment of clarity, of not feeding into the tension. When Adam finally spoke, his voice was calm and controlled. "I appreciate your perspective, Tom. Let's discuss how we can improve this together." His words were not reactive, but responsive. The silence had disarmed the confrontation, giving him the space to choose his response thoughtfully. The transformation. With each passing week, Adam practiced these tools, pausing, reframing, and embracing silence. He noticed something remarkable happening inside himself. His reactions weren't just slowing down, they were changing completely. Where once there was anger, there was now calm. Where once there was defensiveness, there was now understanding. He no longer felt like a slave to his emotions. He was no longer the person who snapped in frustration or let anger dictate his actions. Adam had created a new rhythm for his life, one that was steady, composed, and thoughtful. His relationships began to shift, too. Mia noticed how much calmer and more patient he had become. His colleagues began to trust him more, respecting his ability to remain composed under pressure. He wasn't perfect, of course. There were setbacks, moments where his old habits crept in. But with each mistake, he applied the tools, and each time, he grew stronger. The takeaway. Adam didn't just change his habits, he transformed who he was. He went from a person whose emotional life was driven by reactivity to someone whose responses were measured and deliberate. The truth is, you don't need to be born calm. You just need to train it, one moment at a time. With practice, pausing before reacting becomes second nature. Reframing your thoughts becomes a habit. Silence becomes a powerful tool for clarity. You, too, can change. One pause, one reframe, one moment of silence at a time. And with each of these small steps, you'll build a foundation of calm that no external circumstance can shake. Sophia was no stranger to emotional turmoil. She often felt like she was walking on a tightrope, balancing between anger, frustration, and confusion. It wasn't at work or with colleagues. It was at home, with her family. Her relationships with her parents, her siblings, and especially her partner, James, had been strained for years. The smallest comment would set her off. A slight from her mother, a sarcastic remark from James, even a disagreement with her sister. Each moment felt like a personal attack. When Sophia was growing up, she'd learned that reacting, quickly, passionately, often loudly, was the way to get her voice heard. If something bothered her, she would let it out. The anger would bubble to the surface, and in a flash she would respond. In some moments, it felt empowering. But over time, those reactions took a toll. What once might have been a passionate outburst became a cycle of guilt, hurt feelings, and broken trust. Her relationship with James, in particular, was starting to feel like a battleground. They'd argue about everything. Small things, big things, nothing was off limits. And after every argument, Sophia would feel the weight of regret. She didn't like the person she had become in those moments, defensive, sharp, unable to hear him, only to react. But one night, something changed. The night was quiet, and Sophia was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, when James entered the room, a frown on his face. He seemed distracted, preoccupied. Without thinking, Sophia immediately jumped to conclusions. He's upset with me. He's annoyed. He's probably thinking about something else instead of paying attention to me. In her mind, it was a small spark ready to ignite into a full-blown argument. She opened her mouth, ready to accuse, to defend, to express her frustration that James didn't seem to care about her feelings. But then, in that split second before speaking, she paused. The pause wasn't something she'd planned. It wasn't a moment of self-control. It was instinct. But as soon as it happened, she realized something. I don't have to react this way. I don't have to feel this rage. The anger she'd always felt in similar situations didn't feel so urgent anymore. Instead of lashing out, she closed her mouth and breathed. She didn't say anything at first. The room felt thick with the silence. James noticed the shift. Instead of her usual sharp tone, she was just sitting there, watching him. After a few moments, he spoke quietly. "Sophia, I'm sorry I've been distant. I've just had a lot on my mind." That simple sentence from James stopped her. The anger that had risen in her chest began to dissipate. She hadn't assumed the worst, nor had she reacted impulsively. She simply listened. She gave him the space to speak. In that moment, something clicked inside Sophia. She realized that her reactive nature had been clouding her ability to truly understand those she loved. She wasn't just reacting to the world around her, she was also reacting to the stories in her own head. And those stories were often filled with assumptions, insecurities, and misunderstandings. The first step, the pause. The pause became the first tool Sophia learned to use. Whenever she felt that familiar rush of emotion rising in her chest, she forced herself to stop. The pause wasn't just physical, it was mental. It was about slowing down her automatic response, creating space before reacting. She realized how often her emotions had led her to make assumptions that weren't true. The pause didn't just give her a moment to breathe, it gave her a chance to reassess the situation. The next day, Sophia was at a family dinner. Her mother made a comment about her appearance that, in the past, would have immediately set her off. "Sophia, don't you think you could have dressed a little nicer? You always look so tired." Sophia felt her face flush. Her immediate instinct was to snap back. Does she think I don't care about how I look? But this time, instead of reacting, she took a deep breath. She paused. She realized that her mother wasn't trying to attack her. She was just expressing concern. Maybe her mother didn't understand how hard Sophia had been working. Sophia smiled softly and said, "I've been a little tired lately, but I appreciate your concern." The room was quiet for a moment. For once, instead of fueling the fire, Sophia had diffused it. The rest of the dinner was calm. The tension she had expected didn't materialize, and the conversation flowed naturally. The second step, reframing the story. As Sophia practiced the pause, she realized that it wasn't just about slowing down her reactions, it was also about changing the story she told herself. For years, she'd been operating under the belief that the world was against her, that people's comments were personal attacks. She saw her mother's comments as criticism, her partner's silence as neglect, her sister's disagreements as rejection. But when she began to reframe the stories in her head, everything started to change. Instead of assuming that her mother's words were an insult, she began to see them as concern. Instead of interpreting James's quiet moments as frustration with her, she saw them as his way of processing his own emotions. The shift wasn't about denying her feelings, it was about choosing a different perspective, one that freed her from the emotional traps she had been caught in for so long. One night, after a long day, she was sitting with James, feeling the familiar tension rising between them. He seemed distracted again. In the past, this would have been enough to start a fight. But this time, Sophia stopped herself. She paused. She took a deep breath. Instead of assuming he didn't care, she asked, "Is something on your mind?" James looked at her, surprised. "Yeah, actually, I've been thinking about something for work, but I don't want to bring it up right now." Sophia reframed the situation. She wasn't being ignored. He wasn't upset with her. He just needed a moment. She realized how much of the tension in their relationship had come from her misinterpretation of his actions. By reframing the story, she created space for deeper understanding and compassion. The third step, embracing silence. The final step in Sophia's transformation was learning to embrace silence. In the past, silence felt like a void, a sign that something was wrong. But now she began to understand that silence wasn't always something to fill, it was something to use. One afternoon, during another heated conversation with her sister, Sophia realized that her usual urge to respond immediately was no longer necessary. Her sister was speaking in a way that felt dismissive, but instead of jumping in with a defensive response, Sophia sat back. She let the silence sit between them for a moment. She didn't need to fill the silence with words. She let her sister continue speaking, her thoughts settling. When Sophia finally spoke, her voice was calm. "I understand where you're coming from, but I need you to respect my feelings too." The conversation shifted. The silence had given her the space to think clearly and respond without anger. The transformation. Sophia didn't just change her habits, she transformed her entire emotional landscape. She went from a woman whose emotions dictated her actions to someone who could pause, reframe, and embrace silence in a way that brought peace and clarity. She became more patient, more understanding, and more in control. The relationships that once felt like constant battles began to heal. She no longer felt like a slave to her reactions. She became the master of her responses. And in doing so, she not only changed her habits, she changed who she was. The takeaway. You don't need to be born calm. You just need to train it, one moment at a time. Through practice, pausing before reacting becomes second nature. Reframing your thoughts becomes a habit. Silence becomes a powerful tool for clarity. You too can change. One pause, one reframe, one moment of silence at a time. With each small step, you'll build a foundation of calm that no external circumstance can shake. Strangers test your patience. Loved ones test your triggers. When you're in a close relationship, whether with a partner, a family member, or a close friend, the emotional stakes are higher. The conversations are more personal, the connection deeper, and the reactions more intense. It's easy to slip into old patterns of reacting when someone you care about says something that triggers you, whether it's a criticism, a misunderstanding, or a moment of hurt. These emotional challenges are often where growth happens, but they're also where we're most vulnerable. Let me share a story that highlights this. It's a quiet Sunday evening, and Sarah and Tom are sitting at the dinner table after a long day. The conversation is light at first, talking about their plans for the week, discussing a movie they saw recently. But then, without warning, Tom makes a remark about something Sarah had done earlier in the day, something that she felt embarrassed about. He didn't mean it harshly, but his words land differently. It's a small comment, but to Sarah, it feels like an attack, a subtle reminder of her mistakes in front of no one but him. Immediately, Sarah feels her chest tighten. She wants to fire back, to defend herself, to say something witty or sharp. Why does he always have to point things out? She thinks. I'm just trying my best. The familiar storm of frustration begins to rise, and she feels that familiar impulse to lash out. It's tempting. The words are already on the tip of her tongue, but then she stops herself. She remembers the tools she's been practicing, the pause, the reframe, the silence. Instead of snapping back, Sarah breathes deeply, counting to 3 in her mind. She reminds herself, it's not about defending myself. It's about understanding what's actually happening here. She allows the pause to stretch a little longer, and with each breath, she feels her initial reactions start to fade. Tom, noticing the shift, stops talking. He watches her. Sarah looks at him calmly and chooses her words carefully. "I know you didn't mean it to hurt me," she says quietly. But that comment stung a little. "Can we talk about it?" In that moment, she didn't just manage her reaction, she shifted the entire dynamic. Instead of escalating the situation with anger or defensiveness, she took a step back, paused, reframed the situation, and responded with calm. This subtle change didn't just diffuse the tension, it created an opening for deeper communication and understanding. The tug of war, ego versus love. If you've ever been in a relationship, you know the emotional tug of war that can happen when we're triggered. The instinct is to protect ourselves, to defend our ego, to prove that we're right. But love, real love, isn't about winning an argument or proving a point. It's about connection, understanding, and respect. In moments of tension, our egos often clash with our hearts. Our ego wants to rise up, to defend, to be right, while love asks us to listen, to be vulnerable, and to approach the situation with empathy. The pause is our way of stepping out of that ego-driven need to react and into a place of stillness where we can connect on a deeper level. Relationships are like fire. They can warm you, they can bring you closer, but they can also burn you if you're not careful. Your reaction is the match. A single spark of impatience, defensiveness, or anger can ignite a fire that takes much longer to put out. But when you practice the tools of pausing, reframing, and silence, you gain the ability to choose whether or not to strike that match. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings or denying your needs. It means taking a moment to assess the situation before you act. It's the difference between reacting out of emotion and responding out of intention. A shift in approach. Practicing emotional control in close relationships. The next time you find yourself in a moment of tension with someone you care about, whether it's a partner, family member, or friend, try these steps. Pause. When you feel that emotional surge, whether it's anger, frustration, or defensiveness, pause. Give yourself a few seconds before responding. During that pause, check in with yourself. What am I really feeling? Is this about the comment or something deeper? The pause allows you to step outside the moment and process your emotions before acting on them. Reframe. In relationships, the stories we tell ourselves often shape our reactions. You might hear a comment and immediately assume it's a criticism. But is that the full picture? What if your partner or family member didn't mean it the way it came out? What if their intention was to help or to share something with you? By reframing the situation, you open yourself to understanding and clarity rather than letting your assumptions drive the conversation. Use silence. Silence can be one of the most powerful tools in your emotional control toolkit. In the heat of an argument or tense conversation, silence gives both parties the space to reflect, to process, and to recalibrate. When someone says something that triggers you, instead of responding immediately, choose silence. This doesn't mean withdrawing or disengaging. It means choosing to create a pause in the conversation that allows you to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. Practical insights for immediate application. In arguments. If a loved one says something hurtful, don't react right away. Pause and allow yourself to process your emotions. Ask yourself, what's really going on here? Are they frustrated, stressed, or maybe just tired? By reframing the situation and understanding their perspective, you can respond more calmly, fostering understanding instead of conflict. In sensitive conversations, when talking to someone about a difficult issue, whether it's a partner, family member, or friend, resist the urge to dominate the conversation with your feelings. Give them space to speak. Sometimes, silence is the most powerful way to show that you're listening and that you care enough to understand their side without jumping in. In everyday interactions, even in small moments, like a friend canceling plans or a comment from a sibling that annoys you, practice pausing. Take a breath and resist the urge to immediately voice your frustration. Ask yourself, is this really worth reacting to? By doing so, you preserve the relationship and keep the emotional temperature low. The gift of calm. As you begin to practice these tools in your relationships, you'll notice a subtle but powerful shift. You'll move from reacting out of emotion to responding out of intention. Your relationships will become more grounded, more understanding, and more peaceful. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone, whether it's your partner, a family member, or a close friend, is your calm. In a world that moves so quickly, where emotions often take the wheel, your ability to stay grounded in the midst of conflict is a profound act of love. It not only nurtures your relationships, but helps you become the kind of person who doesn't just react to life, but shapes it with intention. Because in the end, emotional control isn't just about managing your feelings, it's about creating a space where love, understanding, and connection can flourish, no matter what the world throws at you. You'll slip. You'll react. You'll regret it. That doesn't mean you failed. If there's one thing I can promise you about the journey toward emotional control, it's this. It won't be perfect, and that's okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's normal. So often when we start something new, whether it's learning a new skill or improving a part of ourselves, we expect to be perfect right away. But the truth is, emotional control isn't about being perfect. It's about practicing awareness, patience, and persistence. It's about learning to show up for yourself, even when you slip. Let's take a look at a few stories. Case 1. The argument explosion. Daniel had been working hard to practice the pause. He'd learned to take a breath before reacting, to give himself the space to process his emotions. He was determined to stay calm, especially when it came to his relationship with his partner, Lena. One evening, they were having dinner when the conversation took an unexpected turn. Lena casually made a comment about something Daniel had done earlier that day. Nothing malicious, just a casual observation. But Daniel's frustration from the day piled up in an instant. Before he knew it, he exploded. "Why do you always have to bring that up?" he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The words hung in the air, and immediately Daniel felt the regret flooding in. He wanted to take it all back. His body tensed, his mind raced. He had worked so hard to stay calm, yet here he was, caught in the middle of another outburst. But here's the thing. This doesn't mean Daniel had failed. This was part of the process. Emotional control isn't about being free of mistakes. It's about learning from them. The first step was recognizing the slip-up. The second step, forgiving himself and getting back on track. Case 2. The silence trap. Rachel had been practicing the power of silence. She had read about its effectiveness in relationships, particularly in moments of tension. She was trying to embrace silence instead of rushing to speak in order to avoid reacting too quickly. One evening, during a difficult conversation with her friend Maya, Rachel found herself growing frustrated. Maya was going on and on about something trivial, and instead of cutting her off like she normally would, Rachel chose to remain silent. She thought, "I'm doing the right thing. I'm not going to react." But as the conversation continued, Rachel grew more and more resentful. She felt like Maya wasn't listening to her, and that her silence was being misunderstood as passivity. "Why am I just sitting here?" Rachel thought. "I should be speaking up. This is ridiculous." Rachel had confused silence with passivity. But silence is not about being passive. It's about being intentional. Sometimes silence allows space for both people to process their thoughts and emotions. In Rachel's case, she had to realize that silence didn't mean she had to accept everything that was happening. It was okay to speak when it was the right moment, just as it was okay to let things breathe when they needed space. The key takeaway for Rachel, and for anyone using silence, is that silence isn't a permanent solution. It's a tool, one that needs to be used with awareness. The challenge is not to use silence as a way of avoiding conflict, but as a way to center yourself before responding thoughtfully. Case 3. The slow burn of discouragement. Oliver had been feeling frustrated with his progress. He had been practicing pausing before responding, reframing negative thoughts, and embracing silence, but it didn't seem like things were changing quickly enough. One afternoon, he got into a heated exchange with his sibling. The argument escalated, and despite his best efforts, Oliver felt himself reacting. He was aware of his breath. He tried to pause, but before he knew it, his old habits had taken over. He felt like he was starting from square one. "What's the point?" Oliver thought, sinking into his chair after the argument. "If I can't control my emotions by now, maybe I'll never get it." But this is where the process of emotional control diverges from the myth of perfection. Change doesn't happen overnight. Just like physical fitness, emotional fitness takes time, consistency, and patience. You don't stop going to the gym just because one workout was hard or because you didn't see instant results. Emotional control is the same. The key isn't to be perfect, it's to be persistent. When Oliver felt discouraged, the most important thing was to remind himself that this journey was not linear. Setbacks are a natural part of growth. The important part is how he responded afterward. He needed to recognize that even though he slipped up, he could always try again the next time. Every time he practiced the pause, reframed his thoughts, or chose silence, he was building the emotional muscle that would eventually make these tools second nature. Common misconceptions about emotional control. As you work toward mastering emotional control, there are a few myths that might derail your progress. Let's bust some of them. 1. Staying calm means being passive. This is one of the biggest misconceptions. Staying calm does not mean you're giving up your power or submitting to others. It means you are actively choosing how to respond rather than reacting from a place of emotion. Being calm is a strategy. It's a way of gaining clarity and making your decisions from a place of strength, not impulsivity. Silence is not avoidance. It's choosing not to feed into the chaos. 2. If I were truly in control, I wouldn't feel triggered at all. The reality is, everyone gets triggered. Everyone. Emotional control isn't about eliminating your triggers or pretending that you never feel anger, frustration, or sadness. It's about learning how to respond to those emotions without letting them control you. Feeling triggered is a natural human experience. What matters is what you do with that trigger. Can you pause, reframe the situation, and respond with intention? That's where growth happens. 3. If I slip up, I've failed. This is perhaps the most damaging myth. Slips are a part of the process. You'll react. You'll slip up. You'll regret it. But none of this means you've failed. Every time you slip, you learn something valuable. Emotional control isn't about being perfect. It's about practicing, getting back on track, and continuing to try. Micro strategies for bouncing back. Acknowledge the slip-up. When you react impulsively, take a moment to acknowledge it. Don't beat yourself up. Just say, okay, I see what happened there. Now, what can I learn from it? Awareness is the first step to change. Give yourself compassion. It's easy to feel frustrated or discouraged after a setback. Be kind to yourself. Emotional growth takes time, and setbacks don't mean you're not progressing. They're just part of the learning process. Try again tomorrow. Every day is a new opportunity to practice. Don't think of one setback as a failure. Think of it as one moment in your ongoing journey. Try again tomorrow. Each effort adds up. Final reflection. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be aware and willing to try again tomorrow. Emotional control is a practice, not perfection. Just like any other skill, it takes time, patience, and consistency. There will be moments of success and moments of setbacks, but they all add up to a deeper sense of control, clarity, and peace. Keep practicing. The growth is happening, even on the days it doesn't feel like it. If you train for chaos and peace, the storm won't surprise you. We often think of emotional resilience as something we build in the heat of the moment, when we're already overwhelmed, stressed, or facing adversity. But what if I told you the true key to inner calm is not only found in how we respond during a crisis, but in how we prepare for it before it ever happens? In ancient times, Stoic philosophers and warriors alike understood this principle well. They knew that the mind, like the body, needed preparation to handle adversity. The Stoics practiced an idea called negative visualization, which is the process of imagining the worst-case scenarios, not to dwell in fear or despair, but to build resilience and mental clarity. They trained their minds to remain calm, regardless of the storm that might arise. This technique wasn't about expecting the worst to happen, but about strengthening emotional boundaries. By preparing for the inevitable difficulties in life, you become less likely to be blindsided by them. It's like a firefighter who drills in preparation for the blaze, not because they want the fire to come, but because they know the best way to handle it is by being ready. The goal of today's practice is to help you move beyond reactive calm to one that is proactive, one that can be accessed at will, even in the most stressful of situations. When you build emotional resilience through visualization and mental rehearsal, you don't just react to adversity. You remain steady, like an anchor, no matter how high the waves rise. The power of negative visualization. Negative visualization is a powerful Stoic technique that involves imagining adversity in advance. It's not about inviting negativity into your life, but about preparing your mind to deal with hardship. The practice is simple. You take a few moments to reflect on the worst-case scenario, whether it's a plan falling apart, a betrayal, a public failure, or any number of challenges you might face. Why would you want to imagine the worst? The answer is simple. It strengthens your emotional resilience. By imagining adversity before it strikes, you build a mental framework that allows you to face the real thing with greater clarity and calm. It's like training your muscles to lift heavier weights before you face the real challenge. You don't wait for the stress to hit to start preparing. You prepare ahead of time, so you're ready when the pressure comes. Stoics believe that by visualizing adversity, they could diminish the shock and emotional response when it actually happened. They understood that fear and anxiety often stem from uncertainty and the unknown. If you know what to expect and have already emotionally processed it, you are less likely to be overwhelmed in the moment. Instead of being reactive, you become proactive. A guided visualization exercise. Now, I'd like to guide you through a simple but powerful practice to incorporate into your daily routine. You can use this visualization technique every morning during moments of stillness or before a challenging situation. This will allow you to build calm, not just as a response, but as a mental reflex. Close your eyes. Imagine yourself sitting comfortably, your body relaxed and your mind calm. Take a few deep breaths. Inhale deeply through your nose, hold for a moment, and exhale slowly through your mouth. Let your thoughts settle as you prepare for this mental practice. Imagine the worst. Picture a situation that might cause you stress or discomfort. It could be something specific, like a difficult conversation with a loved one, a challenging presentation at work, or a situation where you feel vulnerable or criticized. Imagine this situation unfolding in as much detail as possible. Now, imagine all the things that could go wrong. Perhaps your plan falls apart, someone criticizes you harshly, or an unexpected setback causes chaos. Let yourself sit with the discomfort of that thought for a few moments. Don't resist it. Feel the emotions that arise, the frustration, the disappointment, the fear, but don't let them take control. Observe them. Stay still. In this moment of visualization, notice how your body responds. Do you feel tension in your chest, your stomach, or your shoulders? Is there a tightness in your jaw or a racing thought in your mind? Allow yourself to be present with those feelings, but rather than reacting, stay still. Like a calm observer, watch your emotions come and go. Now, shift your focus. Visualize yourself handling the situation with calm and composure. You might not have all the answers, but you remain steady. You breathe deeply, you take a moment to think, and you respond thoughtfully. In this visualization, you do not react impulsively. Instead, you take a step back, assess the situation, and approach it with clarity and emotional control. See yourself navigating the challenge smoothly, even if things don't go according to plan. You handle the stress gracefully, staying grounded and clear-headed. You may feel some discomfort, but you know how to stay in control. Take another deep breath. As you sit with the image of your steady, calm self, know that this is not just a thought experiment. This is practice. Every time you visualize staying calm in a difficult situation, you are training your mind to do the same when the real challenge arrives. You are creating a mental muscle that, over time, will become automatic. Bring yourself back to the present moment. Gently open your eyes, bringing with you the calm and composure you just visualized. You've just trained your mind for a challenge that may or may not come, but your mind is now stronger and more prepared for whatever does. The more you practice this visualization, the more you'll find yourself able to apply this calm in real-life situations. Practicing mental rehearsal. While negative visualization helps you mentally prepare for adversity, mental rehearsal helps you create a response. It's about visualizing yourself in challenging situations and imagining yourself staying calm, focused, and composed. Just like an athlete rehearsing their moves before a big game, you are rehearsing your response to stress. Take a few minutes every day to imagine a specific situation in the future that might cause you stress. Visualize yourself responding in a way that aligns with the calm, composed person you wish to be. See yourself breathing through the moment, reframing the situation, and handling your emotions with grace. This practice allows you to rehearse the emotional response you want to have. So, when it matters most, it becomes second nature, like firefighters drilling. Before the blaze, visualization and mental rehearsal are like firefighters drilling before the blaze. They don't wait for the fire to start to practice their skills. They train regularly so they're ready when the alarm rings. Similarly, you don't need to wait for chaos to strike before practicing emotional resilience. By visualizing and rehearsing calm, you're preparing yourself for moments of stress and uncertainty, building your ability to stay grounded even in the most challenging of circumstances. The more you rehearse calm, the more it becomes who you are. This is the beauty of emotional not just to the training. end of this audiobook. As you continue but through a practicing mental these journey, techniques, few are brave you'll enough notice to something take. profound. You've walked through the fire Calm of emotional no chaos, longer feels and like now something you stand on reach the other for side in times stronger, of crisis, clearer. It more in becomes your control. natural state. The tools Like you've a gathered, deep river, the pause, steady and unwavering, the reframe, it flows the through you. silence. It's The no longer power about of reacting. visualization. It's about being Have in all come command of your together emotions to reshape not so, just your as you move forward reactions, in your journey, but your remember entire this. relationship with the more world you rehearse and calm, with yourself,
the more it becomes
This isn't
who
the
you
end of your
are.
journey.
When
It's
you
the beginning of a
practice
new
this
chapter.
preparation,
You don't
where
just
you are no
become
longer
someone
controlled
who can
by the
handle
waves
stress
of emotion.
You become
but
someone
where you
who
glide
moves
through
through life with the
calm
calm assurance of someone who knows
unshaken by
their
the
own
storms
power.
around you.
The transformation you've undergone. As you reflect on the journey you've taken, take a moment to appreciate just how far you've come. Remember those early moments of frustration, the times you felt trapped by your emotions, helpless to stop the tide of anger, sadness, or frustration from rising. That was before you discovered the power to pause. Now, you know how to stop yourself in the heat of the moment, how to create a space between stimulus and response, a moment of stillness where you can choose to act with intention instead of reacting impulsively. You've practiced reframing the stories you've told yourself. No longer do you fall into the trap of assuming the worst. Instead, you've learned to question your initial interpretations of situations, to see things with a clearer, more compassionate perspective. You've learned that your emotional world is shaped not by what happens to you, but by how you choose to interpret it. Silence, too, has become your ally. You no longer rush to fill every gap with words, defensive reactions, or emotional outbursts. Instead, you hold silence like a sword, sharp but peaceful, ready to disarm conflict and bring clarity. Where once you might have been swept away by the tide of an argument, you now stand firm, listening, observing, and responding with intention. And let's not forget the power of visualization. You've been preparing your mind for the challenges ahead, mentally rehearsing calm in the face of adversity. You've visualized yourself navigating stressful situations with the quiet confidence of someone who has already been there, who knows exactly how to respond, not out of fear or urgency, but with a deep sense of inner peace. These tools, pause, reframe, silence, and visualization, have become part of who you are. But this isn't just about what you've learned. It's about how you've transformed. You now know how to pause, how to see, how to hold silence like a sword. You've built a foundation for lasting calm that you can carry with you in every situation. A day in the life with your new tools. Imagine for a moment that your day begins tomorrow. The sun rises, and as you open your eyes, you take a moment to breathe deeply, bringing awareness to your breath, grounding, and yourself in the present moment. As you begin your morning routine, you're already preparing yourself for the challenges of the day, not by anticipating stress, but by mentally rehearsing calm. Now, you find yourself in traffic, a situation that once might have sent you into a frenzy, gripping the wheel in frustration, your thoughts racing with irritation, now unfolds differently. You feel the tension rising in your body. But wait, you remember your pause. You take a deep breath, feel your chest expand, and slow your thoughts. This is not my problem. This moment does not need to steal my peace. You can't control the traffic, but you can control how you respond to it. With that realization, the frustration melts away, and the rest of the drive is filled with peaceful clarity. Later, you're in a meeting with a colleague who always seems to have a critical comment. In the past, you would have immediately defended yourself, snapping back, feeling judged. But now, you pause. You feel the familiar tension bubbling up. But instead of reacting, you breathe, then gently reframe the situation. This isn't personal, this is feedback. I can handle this with composure. You smile, nod, and engage in a calm, productive conversation. At home, you're talking to a family member who has, once again, said something that triggered an old wound. Normally, this would have led to an argument, sharp words, hurt feelings, and lingering tension. But now, you breathe. You hold silence. You realize that the words they spoke are not the problem. It's how you're choosing to respond to them. After a few moments of silence, you speak, "I understand you're upset, but I'm not going to let this turn into a fight." The conversation shifts and a potential conflict is diffused. Throughout the day, these tools, pause, reframe, silence, become second nature. You don't have to think about them. They've become part of your emotional reflex, like a well-worn path in the forest that you walk with ease. The power of transformation. This calm is not a gift. It is a practice. And the more you practice it, the more it becomes ingrained in you. Just as a tree becomes stronger with every gust of wind, your emotional resilience grows with every challenge you face. The storms that once threatened to shake you now only make you more rooted, more grounded in your own peace. You see, emotional mastery is not about perfection. It's about consistency. It's about choosing to practice calm in small moments so that when the bigger storms come, you're already prepared. You've trained your mind and body to respond, not out of fear, anger, or stress, but from a place of clarity, peace, and inner strength. As you continue on your journey, remember, peace is a choice, not a gift. Today you've chosen it. Every time you choose to pause, to reframe, to embrace silence, you are actively creating a life of peace, not just for the moments when things go well, but especially for the moments when they don't. The next step, apply it every day. You don't need to wait for life to challenge you. You don't need to wait for the perfect moment to practice. The truth is, life is constantly testing you, but you now have the tools to face whatever comes your way with calm and clarity. The world will always throw challenges, traffic, difficult conversations, unexpected setbacks your way. But the difference now is this: you are ready. You've been practicing for this moment. The next time a challenge arises, you will have the wisdom, the tools, and the inner strength to handle it. Not perfectly, but with grace. The power to remain calm in chaos is within you, and the more you practice, the more it will become your default. So, carry this with you. You are the calm in your own storm, and every time you face a challenge with a pause, a reframe, or a moment of silence, you are one step closer to making that calm your true self. Take a deep breath now. Feel the strength within you. You've come so far, and you're ready for whatever comes next. The world will test you, but now you're prepared.